We have a wonderful presentation tonight. It's on ranked choice voting. Sue Norman is our presenter. She's a volunteer with Rank My Vote Michigan, which is an organization that's kind of, to my mind, operating a lot the way VNP did, but for ranked choice voting, getting the word out, holding town halls, looking at whether there will, it's something to push forward with the ballot initiative. And we do have a lot of really good signature gatherers within this group. So if it's something, we believe in and will get behind, it's important to start knowing now. Sue works as a green building consultant. I assume that means conservationally green, not just only green in color. And has been really politically active her entire life, ran for state rep as an independent and really supporting ranked choice voting. And when she's not, I love when people give you this information, when she's not being paid for her work, she is spending her time being Nana to Chan and Finn, who are her favorite pastimes. So we always like to hear that about people. So Sue, I'm going to let you take it away. And if you have more to share about yourself, that would be great.
So like Liz said, yes, I'm a volunteer with Rank My Vote, and we are all volunteers at this point. And we're similar to VMP in the sense that we're started as a 501c3 doing education about ranked choice voting. Our original goal was to have a ballot initiative ready to go for the ballot in 2022, which means we'd have to be ready to start gathering signatures this spring. And with COVID hitting last year, we haven't made the progress we hoped for. So we're still assessing that in the next couple of months. But the point is today to educate you on ranked choice voting so you understand it and can consider supporting it. So we're a 501c3 I mentioned. What is ranked choice voting? Just simply put, it's a simple change to our voting system. Instead of voting for one person, you can rank your choices. So who do you prefer first, second, or third? And that way you can always vote number one for who you really want. You don't have to feel like you vote for the lesser of two evils or vote for who you think is going to win because you want to keep someone else out. You don't have to vote against anyone. You can always vote for someone. So if it was a three-person race, you would see candidate A is this person's third choice. Candidate B is who they want first. Candidate C is who they want second. Now you can still vote one person like we do now if you want to. You can rank as many or as few as you want. So it doesn't change that. So what are we going to talk about today? So the presentation will talk about the current failures of our system, because why change something if it's working? But there are failures. How is ranked choice voting better? How does ranked choice voting actually work? And how can we get ranked choice voting here in Michigan? So I mentioned the lesser of two evils, and most of us are the most familiar with that problem with the way we vote. Sometimes we don't even think of it as a problem because it's such, ingrained in us. We don't know that there is another way. But the current system gives us lesser of two evils. It tells us if you vote for someone who isn't the likely winner or in the two major parties in the general, you're wasting your vote. So most people, if they're not completely happy, hold their nose and vote. Ranked choice voting, we would change that. Here's an example that better shows what's considered like the spoiler problem, which comes about because of the way we vote. Now, right now, when you vote, usually the person with the most votes wins. Now, when I was in school, I think I learned that we're majority rule, but we're actually not. Our voting system makes us plurality rule. That means whoever just gets the most votes. And I saw on your website that your intent and mission is to defend and promote principles of democracy. And my two favorite principles of democracy that get served by ranked choice voting is majority rule and a better representative democracy. So we'll look a little more at how that happens. But let's look at this. Let's say there's two candidates in a race, and there's the orange type candidate and the green type candidate. Well, most of the people, 70% of them, prefer green type candidates. So if only those two people run, the green type candidate's likely to win. What if more people run? What if more green type people run? Then they're going to split that vote. And it could turn out that an orange type person wins. And that's not who the most people want. You can see even when the other people entered the race, still the majority of people want a green type person, but they're not going to win in plurality. The orange wins. So actually then we get incentivized to have fewer people run, fewer voices, fewer choices. And then what else happens? The people who didn't get the most, this candidate got the most, so that person might be viewed as like the person who was supposed to win or the one that's legitimate to be in the race. And the other two people are called spoilers. And in fact, if you voted for one of those people, you'd probably get blamed and shamed and told you wasted your vote. We had an in-person town hall, and somebody named Trevor, who's only 10 years old, said, "I think the system is the spoiler." So now we quote Trevor every time because he was absolutely right. People aren't spoilers. Voters aren't, spoiling anything by who they vote for. Candidates aren't spoiling something by running. The system spoils it to get us all turned around about who we can vote for. So how big is that problem, the plurality? It doesn't sound like a very, big deal unless you really look at what happens. And currently, so in 2018 in Michigan, of the 14 statewide races, 5 of them won with less than 50%. That's the plurality. Over 50% would mean a majority voted for the person. And that's in an environment when people are discouraged from running, so we don't have even as many choices. In 2020, of these 10 statewide races, 8 of them won with less than 50%. That means the majority of the people wanted someone else. And so when we vote, we don't even really find out the will of the people, actually. Here's another way of looking at it. We can think of it better in our current system when we look at primaries, because that's when the most people run. The system encourages fewer people to run. We already saw that. You don't want to run and spoil it for someone similar of you. So when we look at the primaries, we can see what it's like when so many people run. Here's an example from 2016 Republican primaries. Usually the candidates can be thought about in some kind of general way, like they're a little more moderate, they're more of a Christian conservative, they're in a libertarian type. So then how does the voting work out when it's plurality? This is how people might vote when you look at the dots. See how they cluster. But what did that really tell you about what people want? We don't know. Here's another example with the Democratic Party. So the same concept. People tend to think of Biden more to the right, Bernie more to the left, people in the middle. But how does the voting work out? Well, it kind of gets split across the board. So how would it be if you could rank it and you didn't have to just go with who gets the biggest cluster? That's basically what plurality is, who gets the biggest cluster. You really just don't know about the electorate. We're not finding out what we need to know in our election system. Here's another good real life example that lots of us still hear people talking about. And who gets called the spoiler in this scenario? Ralph Nader. He still gets blamed for Al Gore losing. But he had every right to run. And according to Trevor, the system's a spoiler. Here, we can see if we look at the actual counts and the differences between Bush and Gore, 537, how come Al Gore gets all the blame? Look at all these other people running. It's way more than 537. Any of these votes could have been distributed differently, or these people who didn't run. Who knows how it would turn out? It ends up being more of a random happening. When so many people run, who's going to get the most votes doesn't really show what the people want, but what happens more randomly by who else runs that takes votes supposedly from the other person and whatnot. So imagine if a candidate had to have majority support to win. Nobody won just because the other side had more candidates or because more similar kinds of candidates ran in one type of category. Well, we can have that with ranked choice voting. We can require majority support, and ranked choice voting. A really great example right now is the Georgia runoff. So in Georgia, they do require majority support. So the first election, they didn't have majority winners. That's why they had to do their runoff. Another way to think about ranked choice voting is a built-in instant runoff. You don't have to have the extra election. You don't have to have the extra campaigning, the extra money spent, the extra get out the vote, none of that. You get it done day one, ranked choice voting, instant runoff. I love the Georgia example. So what else does it do? Besides giving us majority winners, it eliminates lesser two evils voting, eliminates wasted votes. What else does it do? Well, once it's in practice, it gives a higher turnout, voting turnout, because people are more satisfied. They can go and actually cast their will, and there's more choices. There might actually be someone they want to vote for. So there's evidence that it increases voter turnout because it increases voter satisfaction. It also reduces negative campaigning. Now that's something almost everybody can get behind, especially after this last election season. When there's ranked choice voting, people who are similar, like those green candidates we saw in the example, they are not going to say negative things about someone similar to them because they want to be ranked at least second. If I'm a candidate and I come to your door, campaigning, I will say, well, please at least vote for me number 2. And I'm not going to be all negative on someone similar to me, because then I can turn you off. And here's the green-orange example. So the two green candidates are similar to each other. The way we have campaigning now, they're actually incentivized to negative campaign and bash each other to try to get that one vote. But with ranked choice voting, they can actually create alliances and coalitions can start forming. Candidate B can campaign and say, if you don't vote for me number 1, vote for me number 2, and A will say the same thing, vice versa. Let's at least be each other's 1 and 2, and then see who ends up on top. And that's actually happened in places that use ranked choice voting. Also, it gives us more representative results. We actually find out the will of the people. And the other thing that we get is more data, because currently the way people do it is they actually publicize all the rankings and all the tabulating. So you know who got how many first place votes and whatnot. So candidates would know, hey, how close did I even come? It would encourage more people to continue to run if they had some positive results. So along with the majority support, it increases turnout, reduces negative campaigning, and has more representative results. That's what I love. So here's the ballot again, like we saw on the back of the t-shirt. This is how a ballot looks today when we go to vote. And this is an example from League of Women Voters. They did this for the Maine sample ballot for the Maine election when they used ranked choice voting. This is how it looks now. You just go pick one. That's it. That's all you get to do. So how does the ballot change for ranked choice voting? You just have to add a column for choices. And then you think about it. Who's my number 1 choice? Going in the voting booth, most people know who's their number 1 choice, A, B, or C. Fill it in. Fill in your dot just the same way. Any questions or anything before I keep going? I'm going to get into a real life example of an election and the tabulating, but I can answer questions first, or we can chat a minute about just the advantages that I talked about.
I think, Sue, this comes later in your presentation if my memory serves, but the only question so far in chat anyway is what states currently use ranked choice voting?
Yeah, great question, and it does come later. We'll look at the whole map of the United States and of the world. But I will have to say Maine is our hero, and I always say that. Maine is the state hero because Maine has ranked choice voting at the state level for state and federal offices, and they've used it in that way, and they've had great results in terms of turnout, voter satisfaction, ease of voting, just really no issue. Any other questions pop up? Is Marianne's sidekick having a question?
Can you cross parties? Republican, Democrat, Libertarian?
Yeah, yes, you can. You can cross parties, you can have straight ticket voting. It all those issues really have nothing to do with ranked choice voting. They all just have to do with ballot design. And ballots can be designed to accommodate any kind of voting that you want. Crossing parties, straight ticket voting, rank 3 of them in one race, rank 1 in another. You just choose. I'll move on to tabulating from a real race. So here's an example, because it really is easy to vote and easy to count. So we were looking at the 3-person example, like on the t-shirt and the League of Women Voters example. This is a real actual ballot that was in Maine in 2018 for their race. And you can see there were 5 choices, and so the ballot can accommodate write-in. And then you would go and rank however many you wanted to rank. So how does that work for tabulating? Because we know when we tabulate a typical election like today, you just count the 1 vote, and whoever gets the most, they win. You're done. In ranked choice voting, when you count those first place choices, if someone has a majority at that point, then you're done. Because that's what we're trying to get, majority rule. If after counting the first place choices, there is not a majority, then it is very simple tabulating, and I've done it in person. Like if we were able to meet all together, the very first presentation I gave was to a libertarian group, and what did we do? We ranked Buffalo Wild Wings sauces because we met at Buffalo Wild Wings, and then I tabulated it, and it's very, you can do hand count and everything. So here's an example, and these are the real people who ran in Maine. It relates to the ballot we just saw, and this is how it turned out. In the first place votes, Poliquin had the most votes, but you can see this line here shows the majority. You have to have 144,812 in order to be 50% plus 1 to have majority. Poliquin does not have majority. So the first round of votes, there is no decision. And now the ranked choice voting tabulating goes into effect. So we look at the person who had the least number of votes. That's the biggest loser. That candidate will get knocked out of the race. And everyone who voted for Hoare for number 1 has their number 2 vote count. So the color coding shows you where the number 2 votes are. Some people in gray chose not to rank anybody else, so their ballot no longer gets counted. Just like when we vote now, if we vote for someone who didn't win, then our ballot's done. So the yellow people, blue, orange, they get distributed. Those votes get distributed over to the candidates for that round of counting. Now, did anyone reach majority? Nope, nobody won majority. So we go to the next lowest candidate, who is now the biggest loser. How are the next rankings distributed for bond? Well, a significant number of people did not do any more ranking. A lot of people chose blue. A lot of people chose orange. You redistribute. And golden is the majority winner. So in this real life example, the majority winner using ranked choice voting was different than the plurality winner. It doesn't always work that way. There's no guarantee. It doesn't do anything about predicting who's going to win. The only prediction it does is that you will get a majority winner and a better representation of the will of the people. The other thing that happened in this race, Poliquin happens to be the Republican. Republicans in Utah love ranked choice voting. They're actually in the forefront of advocating for it. They explained to Poliquin how campaigning should be done in ranked choice voting. He didn't really listen. That's the way the story gets told. The next 2 years later, using ranked choice voting again, Poliquin won. So, it doesn't just mean the person's always going to lose or always going to win or anything like that. But it does affect, you have to campaign differently. Golden did more alliance building, asking for second place votes from Bond and Hoare, and people think that really did actually help. Okay, so That's the tabulating. Do you guys want to talk about tabulating before we talk about where it's used? Some people, see that. I think that visual is really great, but I've seen it a gazillion times. So where is ranked choice voting used? I already said in Maine, which is our state, our hero, because they use it at the state level. Alaska just recently passed it with a combination of other reform bills all together. These are all the different cities and other municipalities that use it. And one of the really exciting things about it, for example, is like you can see clusters happening in places, Colorado and California. Once it starts getting used, communities nearby hear about it, from their friends and whatnot, and then they like it and they want it. And so that's an exciting way it's growing, because people like it. It grows in areas. So we actually did have it used in Ann Arbor in 1975. It was passed in Ferndale in 2004, but it hasn't been implemented yet. We're hoping they do actually implement it. It used to be that the voting machines couldn't accommodate the tabulating. That's no longer true. The voting machines in Michigan can accommodate the tabulating, so that's not an issue. East Point, Michigan has it, and for their city council, and they've used it. I like using that example because there was a complaint about the city council not being representative of the community. The people of color were not getting represented on the city council. So the Department of Justice actually heard the case, and they came out with a ruling, and their remedy was ranked choice voting. To have a more representative city council use ranked choice voting. So I like to say it has the stamp of approval of the Department of Justice. Liz?
Rob Masson had a question before we move on past whatever the question was.
How is the majority determined? Is it actual votes, actual voters, potential votes, potential voters? How do you determine majority? Since let's use the example of 3 candidates. Somebody could be voting, there could be 3 votes, that one voter. So I'm kind of a little bit of a quandary if you're trying to determine that majority, because I understand that's what you're aiming at, a majority winner.
Right. Well, every voter can only vote for one candidate in each ranking, like first, second, or third. So your vote will only be counted once, one at a time. Let me just go back to the tabulating a minute. So the tabulating is showing how the majority is reached. So if we just stop at this point in time, no candidate has a majority yet. The majority is based upon the number of votes that have been cast. So it has to be a majority of the number of votes that have been cast. So this gray area, those people didn't tabulate anymore. So that doesn't count in the total anymore. Let me go to the next one, because then it shows the values here. So then in that example, then now Bond was the biggest loser and there was nobody with majority. So the next, everybody who voted for Bond, their next ranking was Golden, this many people for Golden, and this many people for Poliquin. So those get redistributed. And then you see the numbers. So then you know what the total you're working against to find the majority. Did that answer your question, or can I clarify it in another way?
I think you answered it, because my question was that as long as I know that it's one voter counts toward the majority. I mean, that's the total number of people who cast votes. Regardless of whether they all voted for just one candidate,
right?
Would be split their votes among 3 in ranked order, which would triple the votes, obviously.
Yeah, no, right. No, good question. Yeah, no, it doesn't have anything to do with how many rankings get voted. It matters how many people cast a ballot. That would be the way to say it. How many ballots are in play? Okay. Janet.
That's my question. Was it?
Yeah.
1,000 people who cast ballots.
Right.
We would be 501.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
And-
the question I have is, so with this example,
Okay.
the people that voted for and bond only and
Right.
vote for anybody else, do they get taken out of the total number of voters
Yes.
to reach a plurality or to reach a majority?
Yes.
Okay, so if out of that 19,173 voters that voted for bond, let's say, what does that look like?
Yeah, I don't know what the number is. Well, I think
8,000, let's say 8,000 voters voted for bond only, then the total number of votes cast in this race would be reduced by 8,000 in order to get the winner.
yeah, it's always how many votes were cast with the candidates still in the running.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Because the ballots, and that does, it affects the total, because some people who, when you don't vote, when you don't rank everybody, you're choosing, you're knowing that your ballot might at some point become,
Out.
yeah. And we don't say thrown out, inactive. All of a sudden I'm losing the word in my head, but yeah, nobody wants to think their ballot's getting thrown out, but it's just the same as when we vote now. You go vote for someone. If they didn't win, then your ballot is done. It doesn't get looked at anymore.
Right.
And Sue, Regina wanted to know, does it take the same amount of time to tabulate? Does it take a lot longer to tabulate?
They've actually found that the tabulating does not take longer. The results don't. So far, what they're finding is that there's sometimes, it takes longer to get the results, but it hasn't been attributed to ranked choice voting. I think during hand counts, I don't know if that's absolutely for sure accurate, but I think computers can do it as quickly. Yeah, and I've witnessed those, the recount we recently had, so I know how meticulous it is. But I also have counted a small number, like I told you, hand counted a small number of ranked votes, and I know how systematic and orderly and simple it is. You just pile all the first ones, and then take the loser and distribute the second, and it's just methodical, but it would take a little more time hand counting. Okay, so we have Maine and Alaska. We went through some of the cities, including, we were talking about Ferndale and East Point. East Point having the seal of approval from the Department of Justice, which is one of my favorite things to say. Not everyone says that, but we all have our own things. So then also it's used in party primaries. It's used in military and overseas ballots. And a lot of the reason it's used in the military and overseas ballot, like you can see George is here, is because then they don't have to do that second vote. If they're done, you can't mail them back and forth and everything. So, it's a real logistical savior, so to speak. So then it's also used around, this is just showing more details about the ways it's used and the groups that are working on it around the country. It really has a lot of uptick in interest. A lot of states and communities are working on it now, and we're plugged into the whole network of people working on it around the country. And so that's exciting. It's a really, really supportive community of people that do a lot of sharing. And in fact, BMP's done a lot of help supporting us and advice and, helping us understand just the journey that they were on and things that might work for us. So around the world, where is it used? Scotland, New Zealand, Malta, Australia, Ireland, North Ireland, since 1921, since the early 1900s in New Zealand. And it was actually really invented by someone in the United States. And it had at one time, now I'm not sure if I'm going to get this number right. We've had it, I think, at least like 20 places around the country. And then just over time, sometimes people would object to it, status quo politicians or whatnot. So what are we doing? We're working on educating, growing activists, organizing support. We are working on ballot wording and planning petition signatures if we can do it. We've kind of pulled back a little from saying we're definitely going to 2022. Now we say as soon as we can at the state level, and we're also working on it in municipalities. They're working hard on it in Lansing, Ann Arbor. They're going to work on it in Kalamazoo. I gave a presentation to the Big Rapids City Commission, and they were very interested in it. So as we're looking at whether or not 2022 is feasible because of the virus and other things to really launch a successful petition drive in the spring, we're, looking at our different options and strategies. So things you can do if you'd like to volunteer, we love volunteers. You can go ahead right to rankmyvote.org and just subscribe or volunteer. You can get a newsletter. You can follow us on social media, make a donation, or buy some swag. We have great swag for your dog.
Yeah.
We'll see what other kinds of questions that you might have. Yeah, someone said, I bet the hand counts longer. It probably is. I think the main point, the thing I think about is, of course, I'm sold on ranked choice voting. So if it did take a little longer with the results, I don't feel like that should stop us. And I feel like we're spoiled in our, 24-hour news cycle. We want to know before we went to bed who the winner is. And that just may not even be realistic with any kind of voting.
So we only have one city that's actually using it now?
In Michigan?
In Michigan, yeah.
Currently, East Point is the only city using it. Yes.
What kind of reception are you getting from the various parties, Republican as opposed to Democrat?
Yeah, interesting. Well, we haven't had a lot of experience with the Republicans yet, but the Libertarians are 100% for it. And it's part of their mission and everything. Like the supposed third parties, it's a natural fit for them because it gives them the chance of winning, the chance of being heard, just really makes them viable. Plus, maybe they, agree with it on principle as well, which I wouldn't question. The Democrats, we have gotten some really positive feedback from Democrats, and it varies.
In the chat, I just asked where the petition is that you mentioned in your PowerPoint.
Yeah, well, we don't have a petition yet because we haven't started a petition drive, and we're not sure if we'll be able to get one launched to go on the ballot in 2020 or not. But I'm going to put in our, you can go and subscribe to the newsletter. Yeah, I made it. Or you can volunteer, and you guys know data drives everything. The more people we get, even if it's the only thing you do, it's like, yeah, I like ranked choice voting. Just go subscribe. I know, put up with one more newsletter in your inbox, because data is going to drive our medium and big donors. Who in Michigan really cares about ranked choice voting? That one number helps us do our work. If that's the only thing that you do, I would really appreciate it. Of course, if you want to jump in and sidekick me with, be my sidekick on presentations, or, help on Facebook, or, jump into a chapter, help organize, help us get more of these presentations. That's been our focus, is to we do our public town halls, and we do, on Zoom, and then we do any groups that'll, listen to us. So our chapters, because part of the work I do is chapter coordination. So our chapter leaders are helping and working with volunteers just to find organizations that'll let us come speak to them. So what's your favorite things about ranked choice voting? Because I always emphasize mine.
Mine was, when I first heard it, how much less frustrating would a primary be when I could rank, like just looking back on the last presidential primaries, where I could have my favorite.
Yeah.
But not feel like if I voted for my favorite was, that whole thing we all went through it. Who's the most electable?
Right.
That I would be able to really vote in a primary. I feel like I should vote my heart.
Right.
It gives me a much better opportunity to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. And let me just say one thing that piggybacks on that. The reason we realize it for the primaries, like I said, because we have so many people running. Our system reduces the general to where we feel like we don't even have real choices. So that will expand our choices. We may even feel better about general election once it gets rolling. Okay.
I really hate that, people are told their vote is wasted
Yeah.
or they get beaten up for voting
Yeah.
for, the whole thing during the Clinton Sanders primary.
Yeah.
And it really ticked me off because, you can't force people to vote for somebody.
Right.
And I really got angry with that. And I think we would have a better chance at third party candidates. The reason the primary is so big is because we don't have third parties. And if we had a ranked choice, I think we would have better candidates coming out of the primary if we did have ranked choice. And then Michigan never gets a chance really we're always a really important state in the general.
Yeah.
We should have a bigger voice in the primaries if we're so important. Iowa and New Hampshire, seriously, people,
I know,
they don't count.
There's a lot of problems. We can work on that together next, Karen, but
well, thank you. But I think we would have a bigger voice if we did have ranked choice voting, and people would stop this nonsense about, you wasted your vote.
Exactly.
Or you have to vote for this person.
Exactly.
The candidates don't deserve your vote unless they present something that makes it worthy of you to vote.
I agree
for them.
totally. That's why I do this too, because I've never been so happy with the choices in the general election. Let me say one thing about the primaries that you kind of hit on there, and how it benefits the major parties because they have so many people in there. When they have a plurality candidate go forward to the general, that means they did not get good consensus within their party. So ranked choice voting gives them an opportunity to have a more consensus-based candidate that they've gathered around to be stronger when they move into the general. And that is like the number one way I think it helps the two major parties, but it also helps them in the general because then now they don't have to worry about the third party candidates as much. They can say, please help us be your second choice. And they don't have to run around trying to keep them off the ballot and bad mouthing them. It can be positive campaigning, and people can rank whoever the heck they want to rank.
I think Regina has a question.
I just have a comment. I look at ranked choice voting as giving an opportunity to keep the running in a more positive light and to put it more on issues. Right. Rather than trying to bring down another candidate so you can win. So it forces you to have to focus on the issues.
Exactly. That's an extension of the reducing negative campaigning. Thanks for putting it that way, because that's so important. And aren't we all just hungry for that? Let's talk about policy and issues.
Would this make any difference among candidates on where they decide to put their money and spend their time?
Yeah.
For example, like, we get Iowa, New Hampshire, and some of these places, and other places are just left out. Do you think it would make any difference that way?
I don't know if it would make a difference that way. Well, and especially right away, because it would just be Michigan is what we're working on. Like if we had that in all the states, that I don't know how it would shift the national politics that way. But if you think about it in Michigan, and this is the example of, campaigning to people who you're not sure would vote for you, number one. Like if you're a politician walking a neighborhood, you see someone else's, another candidate's yard sign. Today, you're not going to go to that house and talk to those people. With ranked choice voting, you'll go and say, hey, I'm like this person in this way and this way, and I'm only different in this way and this way. And, could you consider making me your number two choice? So it can affect campaigns that way, and who gets attention, and then also what's been found in the studies is that actually candidates who spend less money have a better fair shot at winning. You can be a person of color, you can be a woman, you can spend less money, and you have a better fair shot of winning. One of the ways I like to compare it to, the great work BMP, and you guys, it sounds like a lot of you were volunteers for that. I was completely on board with that. you know, it leveled the playing field. Ending gerrymandering levels the playing field between the two major parties across the state. You can't have districts drawn to favor one party. I say now it's the time. Add in ranked choice voting and it levels the playing field for all parties and all candidates. And that's should be a fundamental principle of our democracy. Let's all be able to express our will freely at the voting booth. Let's let every candidate who wants to run and have a fair shot.
Missy has a great comment. I think she
Okay,
should.
Missy. How different TV commercials would be. Yeah. And they are. I mean, the studies show it. The politicians already know it. You know, that was the advice that Poliquin was given, you know, that he didn't take in Maine. You know, I mean, it will take some time. That's the thing too, it'll take some time. I think one of the great things about ranked choice voting is you can tell the simple benefits: end wasted votes, end lesser of two evils voting. And right there is great. But it's going to have a cascading domino effect in our whole dynamics of campaigning, who runs, how many voices and choices. That's, you know, one of the taglines: more voices, more choices. It'll shift it in positive ways over time.
So I just have a question. It's like you said, it's not going to be something that's rolled out nationally. It's a state by state kind of a thing. So is there any advantage or disadvantage to the states that have this ranked choice voting compared to the states that don't, as far as having more prominence? Like we talk about, like the primaries, for example, and how Iowa, you know, and New Hampshire, and then there's a few more early, and everybody wants to be in one of the earlier primaries. They don't want to be like those primaries that are at the end. Nobody pays attention. Who cares? Their votes don't really push one candidate forward more than another. So are there any certain advantages or disadvantages to the states that are ranked choice compared to the other ones?
Not that I know of, and I don't think we've had enough. You know, like Maine hasn't been doing it long enough at this state level. Like if you want to talk to, like Kevin, who does these presentations, and Liz saw him give it, he created the slideshow. He's a political scientist professor, you know, so he's read all the studies and I trust what he says. And and he would be very cautious. We don't have any studies, Sue, you know, but we can still all imagine what it might do. What are the possibilities it would give us? And if we think about it, what if, you know, even just in the primary season, candidates that think they have, you know, they can't take Michigan, but maybe they, you know, they're like, well, with ranked choice voting, maybe they can have a coalition where they'd end up on top. You know, because like with the top three people, maybe the second and third people are taking each other's votes, so to speak. Like together, they do have the majority. Then once the ranking got done, you know, one of them would win. So then maybe they would come and campaign more. I think it would just encourage more people to campaign because of the whole idea that more of them have a shot.
Maine is such a good example, having family there. They ended up with an absolutely horrible governor 2 cycles in a row. Nobody really even wanted him the second cycle, but because the vote was so split, he got more votes than the other 2 people and ended up the governor again. Since they switched over, they have a really good governor, just like we do here in Michigan, who's getting them through COVID, which is pretty wonderful. I mean, my family is like very supportive.
That's great. It's great to hear that from the people that are using it. And there was resistance from the Republicans, and, you know, of course, in the courts and everything. And but all the court challenges have, you know, ranked choice voting comes out of the courts looking fine. So that's good. I mean, and that's our system. It should happen that way. So in the chats, it could give an underdog a chance. Yeah, there's no downside to continue to vote with your heart as you rank people. That's a really, really good point, because one of the things we do now when we talk about, you know, voting against someone or trying to keep someone not from winning, lesser of two evils, wasted votes, that's all kind of strategic voting we shouldn't have. We're supposed to be able to just vote our will, our conscience, policy preferences. And so when you rank, you're not hurting anything by ranking and voting your conscience and favorite policy. You just can't. Yeah.
My roommate has a question.
Yeah.
You can't see him. He's over here.
Okay. Hey.
Right. In areas where this has already been implemented, is there any evidence as to whether or not third parties get a boost?
Well, so far, I think it's been in this, Kevin will tell you that, the data isn't showing that they're really winning a lot more, but it's also early and we don't know. And the thing I say, even though I want more voices and choices, and I'm not usually happy with the two major party candidates in the general, I still am firmly on the side of whatever the majority of people want, and maybe it's going to take a while. If what the majority wants is a new party, a different party, what we call a third party, it might take time for voters to really be confident that they can rank that way. There can I don't know. But the bottom line is, if that's the true will of the people, so be it. That's what we're after.
Janet has her hand up.
Do you see this as being something like VMP, where it would be proposed as an amendment to the state constitution, or is there a different way of going about it?
No, that's probably the best way to go about it. I don't think we're going to get our legislature to do it. There are a couple of House bills that are sitting in committee that were just designed to help municipalities and other levels kind of clear the way, because there are some statutes that we'd have to make sure we get covered in the ballot language, some things, because we haven't codified in a lot of our statutes that plurality is the winner. Whoever gets the most votes wins. It's written in to our election DNA, so to speak. So there's a lot of little things we have to make sure get covered. But to get it at the state level, we do think the best way is a constitutional amendment. And because in Michigan, we're fortunate to have that power. Not a lot of states do. So as citizens, we have the power to bring these things forward to each other and say, hey, do you guys want it? I want it. Do you guys want it? But then also at the city level, then what we're doing is typically city councils or city commissions have the power to put it on the ballot. And you can usually go two routes. I mean, it varies, so I'm generalizing, but you could have citizens do the petition drive, get it on the ballot, to have your city do it, or your city council could say, hey, yeah, we like that idea. We'll put it on the ballot for the voters to decide if they want it. So we're looking at it from kind of both angles.
Looks like Don
has a question.
Marianne? Oh, Don?
Yeah. How far up the judicial food chain have cases gone? Are they up to the appellate level in federal court, or is it all in lower courts yet?
Yeah, no, it's not all in lower courts, and I'm not going to say exactly because I don't want to quote it wrong, but I know I'm thinking in Maine. Trying to think, I think Maine went the highest. Let me look up Maine, and in my follow-up email, I'll let you know how high did it go. But in Michigan, it's past court muster, because when we had it in Ann Arbor, okay, so first it was passed in Ann Arbor by a ballot proposal voted on, and then one of the major parties took it to court, and the court said it holds up. They claimed that it isn't upholding the one person, one vote, and they claimed something else. And the court said, no, it's good to go. Ann Arbor's allowed to do it because they have the home rule, and it does respect one person, one vote principle. So the court said, tough luck, it stands. So then that political party took it to the voters again in Ann Arbor in a low turnout kind of off election, and they got it repealed. But now they're working on it now. People in Ann Arbor are working on it again. But what I'm saying is it passed muster in Michigan courts. So there's a question, would this add a level of complexity to elections which would turn off the casual voter? I think, we rank things in our personal life all the time. If all of us were going to go out to dinner together, we wouldn't go just to the place the most people wanted to go. We would, see what everybody wanted. Somebody's allergic to seafood, somebody can't do gluten, somebody's a vegetarian. You come to more of a consensus-based thing, and you go to where most people would be happy. And when you explain ranked choice voting, people realize that. And when you think about the primary, so for casual voters that it sounds complex to, and they don't want to think about ranking, we can just say to them, you don't have to. You're willing to vote? Is there one person you want? Go vote for them just like you always did. And I also think that this dovetails so perfectly with our other election reforms. You know, we love that we ended gerrymandering, but we had the whole other, you know, collection of voter rights and having absentee ballot for no reason. You could have your ballot sitting on the kitchen table for a week. Take your time ranking, take your time researching. So even casual voters, you know, you have a way to explain to them how they can still either vote like they always did or give themselves some time. Maybe they want to become a less casual voter. But let's face it, most of us, I mean, if you're like me, I'm still Googling the judges and the, you know, state, you know, yeah, who's the state board or whatever. I'm like, I never heard these people. So, you know, and I think of myself as well informed. I don't know how I fall on the spectrum, but I'm researching that, or else sometimes I don't vote in a category. I'm like, I don't know, I didn't do my research. I'm not going to just close my eyes and vote, you know? Okay, another question, is it Bob?
Oh, you just got a wonderful compliment in the chat from someone who went to Kevin's and thought you did just as great, if more.
Yay!
So there you go.
I'll tell Kevin.
That's high praise.
Yes, it is. It is.
If there's one more question out there, maybe Don has his hand up, but
okay,
I hate to do
Don.
this because this is a wonderful discussion, but we actually do have to do it.
I realize. Thank you for all the time. Thank you for letting me come.
No, I hate to shut it down because it's a wonderful discussion, but let Don finish us up.
Don.
When it has been introduced, has the number of votes gone down and then rebounded?
No, voter turnout goes up. It either, right now the studies are showing it stays the same or it goes up. Now in the United States, you know, we don't have as much data. So some studies, you know, it's such a small bit of data, it might say something that looks a little negative, but it's a really small bit of data that we shouldn't really even be going by if you look at like one city or whatever. And then there's also always other factors. And I don't want to misquote it. It may have been in Colorado because they started the, you know, absentee ballot for no reason. At the same time, they started ranked choice voting. Their voter turnout went way up. Well, so now what was the factor that made it go way up? You know, combinations of things. But they're not finding that it goes down or is harmful.
Well, that seems to be a great point to finish on. It makes
it is. Thank
easier, more representative, and gets more people to vote. I'd say those were all wins right there.
I do too. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Sue. We really appreciate you giving us your time. This was very valuable.
Thank you. I loved it. You guys are great. And just keep in touch with us with any questions. If you know of any other groups that want to talk like this, we come to anyone who wants us.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.